So let me ask you this. I saw a headline a few weeks back that said Ben Crump and the family is going to allow the Jackson County Sheriff's Office access to Nolan's phone. You know what I never heard? I never heard him follow through with that. I have reason to believe, and I do believe, that they have not cooperated with law enforcement. I do not think that they have turned in Nolan's phone. And I'm willing to bet my reputation on it. I don't think they've cooperated at all. They do not have Nolan's phone. They haven't had access to Nolan's phone. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department has it. So how can you say that there's text missing or there's photographs missing? Our boys had no reason to do anything with Nolan's phone other than give it back to Christine and her friends later that night. So anything about missing text messages or Snapchats is completely false.
I'm willing to bet my reputation on it. 8 words delivered by attorney Tyler Cox on the Dan Abrams show, and with them, the entire Nolan Wells case shifted on its axis. This was not a legal argument. This was a public accusation that the family demanding answers from law enforcement is, according to opposing counsel, refusing to hand over the single most important piece of evidence in the case. Think about that structure for a moment. Imagine a house is on fire and the family inside is screaming for investigators to find the cause. Now imagine those same family members are standing in the driveway holding the only key to the room where the fire started. That is the visual contradiction now defining this story. One side says the phone was wiped. The other side says the phone was never surrendered. Both cannot be true. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Beyond the Gavel File. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence.
Did Nolan Wells' family not turn over his cell phone to the police? The lawyer for one of Nolan's friends just made that accusation on Dan Abrams' Sirius show, and we're going to bring on Dan to give his take on that and the latest on this case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. What a statement on the Nolan Wells case, right? Did Nolan Wells' family not turn over his phone to authorities? Now, I got to explain where this allegation is coming from because it just happened on Dan Abrams' Sirius show, and we're going to bring Dan on. But Nolan Wells, of course, is the 18-year-old college football player who died after a July 4th boating trip to this barrier island known as Horn Island out in Mississippi. His body was found on July 6th. His family is demanding answers. They are demanding a thorough and complete investigation. They have hired their own attorney, Ben Crump, to conduct an independent investigation as authorities, namely the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, conduct their own.
The background is this. Nolan Wells, an 18-year-old college football player, died after a July 4th boating trip to Horn Island, a barrier island off the Mississippi coast. His body was found 2 days later. The official autopsy and toxicology reports remain sealed under Mississippi law, pending a grand jury review. We do not know the cause of death. We do not know the manner of death. We do not know if a crime occurred at all.
Conduct their own investigation. The results of the state official autopsy toxicology report, they have not been released. The case is expected to go to a grand jury under Mississippi law for potential criminal charges. Only after that could we expect to see the autopsy report, the toxicology report. But look, we don't even know for sure how Nolan died. We don't know the circumstances of his death. We don't know what caused.
What we do know is that Ben Crump, the family's attorney, publicly stated that his team and authorities would conduct what he called a mutual inspection of Nolan's phone. His words were that former law enforcement experts would assist with the cell phone download so that everyone could see the contents at the same time. That was the public commitment. That was the official framing.
Reporting by the New York Post. Remember, they're also just conducting their own independent investigation as to what happened here. Now, Ben Crump had reportedly indicated at one point that his team and authorities would do a mutual inspection of Nolan's phone. And Crump had said that their own former law enforcement experts will, quote, help us with the cell phone downloads so everybody will be able to see at the same time what the cell phone has. But then this happens. Caller Mo comes on and asks this, and then listen to Tyler Cox's reaction.
Let's go.
Then a caller named Mo asked a simple question on the Dan Abrams show.
Let's go to Mo in Houston. Mo, how you doing? What do you got?
Hey, Dan, love the show. I appreciate you gentlemen for coming on as well.
Thank you.
A couple quick things. was Nolan Wells, were there messages missing out of his phone? And the second thing is
Absolutely
photos
not.
have come out. Yeah, they were. Yeah, they're saying that there were messages missing off of his phone. His phone was wiped. And another thing, there's pictures of, like with the modern day with people with cell phones and social media, there's pictures with adults on that boat. There, in one of the adults, they're even saying it's like an affluent crowd, judge, businessman. They were saying there's just kids, but there are adults there.
Yeah.
Right, but here's the thing that they're saying. I don't know who the they is, but go ahead. Tyler, you want to take this one? Or
yeah,
Ed?
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Were there messages missing from Nolan's phone? And Tyler Cox, the attorney representing one of Nolan's friends, detonated the entire premise. He said he never heard that Ben Crump followed through with the phone handover. He said he had reason to believe the family had not cooperated with law enforcement. He said the Jackson County Sheriff's Office does not have the phone, and then he said this: "I'm willing to bet my reputation on it." There it is again. That phrase. A lawyer staking his professional name on the claim that the family demanding a thorough investigation is withholding the very device that could answer every question. So which is it? Is the phone missing messages because someone deleted them? Or is the phone missing entirely from the evidence chain? Because here is the structural problem. The family issued subpoenas to Snapchat, WhatsApp, TikTok, Meta, and Life360, suggesting they are seeking data from third parties. But if the physical device was turned over to the sheriff's office as promised, the subpoenas would be largely redundant. You would not need to subpoena Snapchat for what the phone itself already contains. The subpoena trail suggests the phone is not where.
That is when a caller named Mo asked about Nolan's phone. Now, let me remind everybody about this, about Nolan's phone for a second. Nolan's mom previously reportedly claimed that when the family got Nolan's phone back, seemingly from his friends, that she actually tracked the phone down using a Life360 app, she reportedly claimed that there were no pictures or videos on these Snapchat accounts that Nolan had. So it was a concern that was information deleted. And you couple that with the report that Nolan's family had issued subpoenas to companies like Snapchat and WhatsApp and TikTok and Meta and Life360, potentially as part of upcoming litigation. This is according to court documents that were obtained by the Sun Herald, reporting by the New York.
The public was told it would be. That is the gap between the official statement and the actual record. Now consider the third investigation angle.
Their position is.
What I also find interesting is this is now a third investigation that's happening. So you have local law enforcement investigating at the sheriff's office. You have the family, Nolan Wells' family, conducting their own investigation. And then you spoke with the attorneys that are representing Nolan's friends who are conducting seemingly their own investigation, going to the island. What did they tell you about that and about what their goal is right now?
Yeah, I mean, they basically were saying that they're not really trying to investigate this the same way the authorities are trying to investigate it. You know, from their perspective is their clients don't know what happened to him after the last time they saw him that afternoon, right? So their position is we wanted to go to Horn Island to make sure that, in particular, their new lawyer understood the landscape, just had a sense of what it's like there, so that when he's talking about this, and again, potentially filing defamation lawsuits in connection with it, that he had a good handle on exactly sort of how the island works. And I say that because, yeah, this isn't a typical island where there's like facilities and stuff. It's just like people go there, they go boating there, they bring their boats there, and then they leave, right? And so, you know, they wanted to look at, you know, where the rip currents could be, and just, you know, as they said, not to draw conclusions, but just so, you know, they can be educated, in particular their new lawyer, because Tyler Cox had already been there, in discussing the case.
I have to say, and I mentioned
The friends' attorneys returned to Horn Island with their clients to examine the landscape. They appeared on public platforms. They denied involvement. Their lawyer asked a question that cuts to the core of the entire affair. Would we be crazy enough to put our clients out there?
And I mentioned this point before on Sidebar, that I find it interesting that not only have these guys, you know, lawyered up and have taken kind of more of a proactive position, but they're going on Brandon Tatum's show. It seems to me that it might help their credibility. I'm curious your thought, because if you have these accusations against them, if they really were a part of this in some way, if they really had something to do with Nolan's death, the last thing they would want to do is litigate this and have discovery and have potentially damning evidence come out against them. They would remain quiet. Do you think I'm looking at it the wrong way? I mean, because that's something that came out to me.
That's exactly what their lawyers said. I mean, their lawyers specifically said to me, do you think we'd be so crazy as to put our clients out there if we thought that they had anything potentially incriminating to say? And, you know, look, you do need to look at this, I think, this case from the kind of the big picture, which is, what is the evidence? And I always say this about this case when I talk about it, which is typically in these high profile investigations, when things are bubbling up, right, and the investigation is ongoing, what makes these cases have layers is inconsistencies, is things that don't add up about what the defendants are, what the witnesses, potential suspects are saying, right? And yet that hasn't been the case here, right? I mean, yeah, people are saying, well, I have questions about the call that they made for help. I have questions about why Nolan's phone was on the boat. Okay, that's great to have questions. But that's not the same thing as saying, wait a second here. This story doesn't make sense. The problem, with where we are today is their story, in my view, does kind of make sense, right? And so there has to be something else, because let's even assume the very worst case scenario as far as I'm concerned, which is that there was some sort of fight between Nolan and his friends. They say that didn't happen, but let's even assume that happened, and they left him on the island. Okay, that's not murder. That's not manslaughter, right? This island is an island where people are constantly going on other people's boats to leave. It's not just like, oh my goodness, if you don't get back on your boat, you'll never get out. So even if that happened, it would be bad, right? But I kind of feel like we know about it already. Meaning there were so many different people who were involved in this group. There would be, 3 people saying, yeah, those 2 guys didn't want to let him back on the boat. And we haven't heard that. So I just think that, and I think these lawyers are right to say,
if we thought they had anything incriminating to say, that is not exculpatory evidence.
About to play you from SiriusXM, which is shocking, if true. We reported the other day that Nolan's friends, who apparently were with him that day, have hired lawyers. So we're talking about Warren Hudson, Jax Patallo, Morgan Seymour, and that according to TMZ, Hudson and Patallo took their lawyers, J. Tyler Cox and Edward Andrew Paltzik, back to Horn Island. So it seems they may be conducting their own independent investigation. And this seems to be in light of reported threats that they've been receiving. There's been kind of the rumblings they may file their own kind of defamation actions against people who have been spreading what they claim is misinformation about them online. So they go to this island, maybe get a better understanding of the island's layout, the dynamics. And to be clear, when I talk about potential litigation, there has been online speculation that they were somehow involved in what happened to Nolan. To be clear, there is nothing that we have seen released by authorities to verify that in any way.
That is a litigation posture. But it raises the same question again. If the family wants the public to believe the truth is being hidden, why has the physical phone not been turned over to the agency investigating the death? Here is the ticking clock moment. At what point does a family's demand for transparency become indistinguishable from a strategy to control the narrative? Because if the phone is in the possession of the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, then every accusation of a wiped device is demonstrably false. And if the phone is not in their possession, then every public plea for a thorough investigation is missing its most essential instrument. Either way, someone in this story is not telling the public what they know.
How that could even be possible?
Well, I mean, look, I would think they probably don't have to turn it over. Remember, from the police perspective, they start this by saying, we don't think there's foul play, but we're certainly going to investigate, right? They're not investigating any wrongdoing by the family of Nolan Wells. They're not investigating any wrongdoing by Nolan Wells himself. So the question of, do they get a warrant? I guess they could, but I don't know that if it's true, I don't know that the authorities really want to be at odds, right, with the family, because in theory, it is the family calling for the authorities to do a thorough investigation. And if they're not helping in that, then obviously that's a problem. Now, maybe they're going to take the position that they don't think that the authorities are doing a good or thorough or fair investigation. I don't know. We really need to talk to them about that to determine what their position. You better be really careful when you're pointing the finger at these friends. And I'm so sorry that this has become a sort of a race case. And I say I'm so sorry because in theory, what this is a black kid and white kids who were friends. They were really good friends, right? And suddenly, the fact that they were of different races is changing people's perception of the evidence. And that is really, macro picture, that's upsetting, right? That's not where we want our society to be.
And I don't blame a family wanting all the answers and maybe not trusting law enforcement and saying they came out too quickly to say it was not foul play and wanting to have an attorney navigate it for them. And to be honest, I whether it's the video that's come out of the boat seemingly taking on water or the audio, again, nothing to suggest to me that Nolan was on that boat. So it seems to support the narrative he was on the island. The only thing that stands out to me right now that I just can't make sense of, if this was an accident, if this was a drowning, this is an island, like you said, so many people. I don't know who law enforcement has spoken to, but no one saw him. No one saw him in distress. No, that's the part about it that that's the only thing I can't grasp.
I completely agree, but that also doesn't point the finger at the friends, right?
100%.
Right. So if the friends left the island at the time that they say they left the island, right? Look, there is definitely like a question, like what happened here, right? I mean, he's talking to this woman. He didn't apparently talk to her for that long. He decided to stay on the island or stayed on the island, whatever the case may be. But you're right. We don't know then what happened after that. But that's a separate question from saying, oh, well, I'm suspicious of the friends because they made a phone call or because, all these wacky conspiracy theories out there. So we just need to separate out the desire to have a little bit of a better understanding of what could have happened to Nolan versus pointing the finger at the friends.
Before we wrap things up, there's one over.
And that brings us back to the phrase that now anchors this entire case. I'm willing to bet my reputation on it. A lawyer said it in public. Not in a court filing, not in a private letter. In public, on the record. So now the burden shifts, because Ben Crump has not, as of this recording, publicly produced a receipt of transfer. He has not released a chain of custody log. He has not shown the public a single document proving the phone was surrendered to authorities. And in the absence of that document, the accusation stands.
So after hearing that, let me bring on now the host of the Dan Abrams Show on SiriusXM POTUS Channel 124, Dan Abrams, founder of Law and Crime. Dan, good to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Jesse, great to be with you.
So the attorneys come on. Tyler Cox makes that statement, willing to bet his reputation that Ben Crump and the family haven't turned the phone over. What did you make of that?
I mean, I was stunned when they said it, right? I mean, when I invited them on the show, I didn't really think they were going to break news. I thought they were going to more talk about the defamation lawsuits that they were talking about, et cetera. But when he said that, I sort of paused and I was like, whoa, wait a second. He's accusing them of withholding evidence from the investigation. And sort of that's what everyone is calling for, right? Which is everyone saying, let the investigation proceed. Let's see what the investigation turns up. And you gotta hope that the family is going to be willing to turn over the phone as part of that investigation.
Look, you've covered cases for such a long time. I have never heard of a mutual inspection of a cell phone that could potentially be a crucial piece of evidence in this case, where their own experts and police are going to somehow simultaneously look at the phone at the same time. This is a different case, and it just made me wonder, how could they potentially refuse to turn the phone over? I mean, look, police would have to have a warrant, but at the same time, I'm trying to understand how that could even be.
There is one publicly available court filing that could settle this. The subpoenas, issued to the social media companies, were obtained by the Sun Herald and reported by the New York Post. Those documents are in the public record. Go find them. And ask yourself one question. If the phone was already in the hands of the sheriff's office, why does the family need to subpoena Snapshot at all? Comment below with your answer.
Overarching question I've had for weeks now. Do you think that if there are no criminal charges from the grand jury, if the autopsy from the state shows this was an accidental drowning, is that going to be the end of the story? Or do you think that people out there, maybe even the family, will not accept that?
No way it's going to be the end of the story, because as you know, Jesse, medical examiner reports are often ambiguous, right? They're often different ways to interpret it, right? So, the medical examiner really is going to assess, was it a homicide or not, right? Meaning, did he die at the hands of someone else or not? And if there is no evidence that this was a homicide in a typical investigation, that would kind of be the end of it, right? Which is, it's not a homicide. No one killed him. So time to move on. I don't think that's going to happen here, in particular because of the racial angle on this. I think Ben Crump is stating that, right? Ben Crump is saying, is lumping this case in with other cases of Black late teens boys in Mississippi who he thinks the investigations have not been thorough enough. I think that this investigation is going to be as thorough as it can be. And my guess is that there's going to be a level of dissatisfaction no matter what they come up with. But look, people like you and me, we focus on facts and evidence, right? We don't get into the conspiracy theory rabbit hole.
If you found this breakdown useful, like this video, share it with someone who still thinks this case is about a boating accident, and subscribe to Beyond the Gavel File with notifications turned on, because the evidence doesn't lie, but people do.